I think that one thing that employers should really understand and take from this about athletes is they bring a performance mindset that is incredibly hard to teach. And I think for athletes, be mindful not to undersell yourself and assume that employers will automatically see your value in your sporting background on paper.
You're listening to Becoming MatchFit, the podcast helping athletes and high performers build confidence, clarity, and opportunity on and off the field. I'm your host, Nick Greentree. Welcome back to Becoming MatchFit. Today's episode is a really practical one, but it's also a mindset shift. We're unpacking how athletes can start building a career alongside sport, what employers are actually looking for, and why athletes might be one of the most underutilized high performance talent pools in the workforce. So I've spent a large part of my career in corporate environments, working at an executive level. And we were trained to build high performing teams. If someone wasn't performing at that level, well, we had to make decisions pretty quickly. So hiring wasn't just about skills, it was about mindset, attitude, and performance. And when I look at athletes, I see the same foundation. They're already operating as high performers. They just haven't necessarily been given the opportunity to translate that into the workplace. And to me, that's a huge opportunity, not just for athletes, but for how we think about hiring and productivity more broadly. And that's exactly what today's guest is working on. Today, I'm joined by Anita Nichols, who has recently launched You've Got Talent. Anita brings years of experience in recruitment, including senior roles at Hudson and Tabcorp, and has seen firsthand how hiring decisions are made. She's now focused on helping high-performing individuals, including athletes, better navigate the workforce and connect with the right opportunities. Welcome, Anita. It's so great to have you here on the podcast today.
Thanks so much, Nick. It's great to be here.
So before we get into all the good juicy stuff and the practical info that you're going to share with us, congratulations on launching You've Got Talent.
Thank you so much. It's super exciting. And my worst kept secret is out now, and I'm doing something that I'm absolutely incredibly passionate about.
Amazing. What inspired you to start it?
I have had a little over 20 years experience in my craft, and I think at times recruitment can be very transactional. So during my career, I've often seen the candidate experience fall very short. When recruiters are working on high volume, often the candidate experience can be impacted. And I just saw a real gap in the market to provide a relationship-led fee-for-service model that really focused on that candidate care and candidate experience. And another part of my inspiration was my beautiful mum, Jenny, who was my number one supporter. And I was telling her about my business opportunity last year, and she told me to go for it. And here I am going for it. And I'm really thrilled to be able to do it.
I love that story. So congratulations. And before we jump into it, I know that you've worked with Bells before, and that's how we connected, but you lead with heart in everything that you do. And our interactions have always been that way. So I'm very thankful.
Appreciate it.
So jumping into it, Anita, I've got a question about experience versus performance. Do you think that we are over-indexing on experience and maybe under-indexing on performance potential?
I think absolutely we do. And I think the reason for that, we do it because experience feels safer. And it's easy to point to and easy to measure and easy to justify. You can say that they've done this before, they've worked in the industry, they've got the right title, and it helps people feel like they're making a low-risk decision. I think as recruiters, what we need to do is really understand our client and hiring managers' expectations and not focus so much on just the experience, because candidates can bring so much more, and we all know that. So I think we need to look beyond the CV.
That makes sense. And I guess back to your point of building that relationship, because you're only going to really understand the potential when you understand the person, not the what's on paper.
Yeah.
Yep. Fantastic. So it's really not a skills gap. It's kind of a translation gap is what you're saying.
100% it is a translation.
And where would you see athletes fitting into this gap?
I think athletes fit into this gap perfectly. When I look at athletes, and I have recruited a couple of athletes in my time, but I don't see athletes starting from zero. So they already understand commitment, they understand consistency, they understand feedback, and that importance of teamwork is often it's really underrated. It's such a great skill to have. They understand pressure, they understand pushing through setbacks, and that is incredibly valuable in the workplace. I think the challenge is that employers don't always recognize that straight away, and athletes don't always know how to translate that into a way that employers can understand it.
Do you think then that businesses are maybe missing out on an opportunity by not recognizing the athletes as high performance talent?
Absolutely, they do. And I think recruiters will often rely on traditional recruitment methods by, looking at what's in a job brief and matching that to, what's in a CV. But I think, they definitely need to explore that during the hiring process.
And you mentioned that perhaps athletes aren't quite sure how to extract out those skills that they have maybe through training and on the field. If they have these traits, what can they do to better represent themselves if they are looking for employment, whether it's part-time or full-time or post their athletic career?
Yeah. One of my biggest tips, and this isn't just for athletes, but this is for all candidates, that it's building relationships, really partnering with a couple of key recruiters in the market, but also becoming a lot more seen on platforms like LinkedIn and other social media platforms.
So, Anita, if someone is in that earlier phase or even in the elite phase, what can they be doing now to really set themselves up for success in their career?
I honestly believe that as an athlete at the early stages of your career, you need to have a plan. So you need to start small and sooner than you actually think. I was talking to somebody who coaches high performance athletes on the weekend, and he was telling me that a lot of athletes come out of their careers and they don't have a plan and often feel really lost, and it makes it a lot harder for them to transition into the workforce again. So you don't need to wait until sport finishes for you. You just need to have a plan. So that might be some part-time work. It could be project work. It could be even casual work, and also building your network as well, improving your LinkedIn profile. And importantly, and I touched on this earlier, having conversations and really starting to build good relationships and learning how to talk about your value once your career ends as well.
Transitioning out of sport can be very, very jarring for many athletes. So yeah, it makes sense to have that plan early. So it's less of a stress. Unfortunately, the reality is that injuries can occur and you can perhaps be taken out of your sport earlier than you had planned. And so I think having that plan really just gives you that buffer to be able to look at what's next.
Definitely.
Girls and I were chatting with an ex-athlete last week. They were NRL forward and they just needed to be seen. And so started showing up to leadership opportunities or being in the room. Once he opened his mouth, people were quite surprised. And we're like, oh, you do have more than this physical ability to tackle. And once that happened, new opportunities opened up. And so I think your point about just being in the room, being seen in a different light, it's putting your best foot forward.
Definitely. And just on that, I think candidates need to think about how they position their CV as well. I think in a world where AI is really, it's doing a lot in the recruitment space as well. It's a tool to help people understand how they operate. So I think whilst athletes will often include experience and what they've done, I think they also need to talk to, I guess, the time management component, how they communicate, show accountability, resilience, how they work in teams, and how they're able to learn quickly. I think, organisations need to be really open to that. But if candidates are, showing that they've got the potential to learn quickly and manage competing demands, that's certainly really advantageous. And I think athletes can sometimes leave that out. Like one of the most compelling things that they can do on their CV as well.
Fantastic. Great tip. You've also just reminded me of another conversation where sometimes, because athletes can be managed by agents, sometimes the agents have maybe babied them a little and done a bit too much in terms of just some basic skills. If you're an athlete, just to lean in and upskill yourself and really take that control over your destiny.
Definitely. And I think that's something that everybody should be doing, really upskilling continuously. We're living in an environment where the landscape of technology is changing so much and so quickly. And it's certainly changed a lot over my career as well. So upskilling is really, really important. And there's so many free resources available as well to us. So we should really be taking advantage of those.
So, do you maybe see this as a personal branding challenge where athletes need a bit of help communicating their value, but in a way that businesses understand?
100%. I think branding is absolutely everything when it comes to looking for, your next job, and not just building your brand on platforms like LinkedIn, but also building your brand out there with the right people that are going to help you get seen. So I would agree that branding is everything when it comes to looking for a job. A lot of athletes have got really amazing experience, but their CV or their LinkedIn profile can sound too sports specific. So instead of assuming that employers or recruiters are going to just connect the dots, we've got to work with them to help them do that. Talking about leadership and teamwork and routines and accountability and goal setting, performance under pressure. There's so many things that they can absolutely draw out as part of that branding. The talent's there. It's just understanding how they can translate that.
Yeah, good point, actually. You keep mentioning LinkedIn, but I do find that most athletes focus on Instagram, perhaps TikTok too,
Mhm.
and don't really utilize LinkedIn as a platform. How do you recommend that athletes harness LinkedIn to show their capability and their personal brand?
Great question, Nick. I think LinkedIn is a great opportunity to really improve your brand. There's the posting elements, posting regularly to be seen. I know that the algorithm on LinkedIn improves a lot when you're constantly commenting on posts, you're posting yourself. It's also got a great opportunity for you to set up job alerts. So if, for example, you're looking for project coordination roles, you can set up a job alert where you are getting sent regular jobs that align to your skill set. And thirdly, and this is probably one of my favorite ways to use LinkedIn, is for networking. So, it's a great opportunity to network with like-minded organizations and other people within your.
Absolutely. I definitely use LinkedIn almost daily, I would say, and I have done for many, many years. I find it incredibly valuable, obviously, for career, but I think that long-term benefits, it's, staying in contact with people that you might not on a day-to-day basis. You might have worked with them previously, but, how do you stay in contact? And also just staying visible. Yeah, you might have worked with that person before, but now they're seeing all my content and they're like reaching out going, hey, are you still doing this? Because I've got someone I can refer. And to me, that's gold. That wouldn't happen without LinkedIn, right?
It's so true. And, another great example is when I launched my business a couple of weeks ago and I posted to LinkedIn. I had so many people that I'd worked with previously, like 10, 15 years ago, that reached out to me. And it really is a valuable tool.
Definitely. And I think for a sporting context, if you've just like worked with one club, connect with those people and start there. And then you'll start to branch out because people move around all the time. So you're not, just limiting yourself to who you currently know. It's their networks too. And I think that is the power of the obviously online networking.
And I think that LinkedIn conversation, it's one part of the strategy for athletes. I think, there's also a lot of value in Facebook communities as well, and really getting yourself seen on communities there.
If someone's not quite sure on what to do, they can reach out to you.
Definitely more than happy to talk to any potential candidates that need some advice on improving their LinkedIn profile, CV review. And with candidates, there's no charge for that. I'm happy to work with candidates to help them. It's what I'm passionate about.
Amazing. That's why we love you, Anita. So they are great tips on LinkedIn. But of course, when you're applying for roles, we need to put together a really solid CV to position yourself. If I'm an athlete listening, and with all the AI that is now evolving in the recruitment space, I understand that often there are AI bots that are doing the first round of screening on CVs. How do I position my CV in a way that is going to get through that first culling?
You're absolutely right. Organisations are using AI platforms now to help them reduce the time to review hundreds of CVs. I've just finished up in a corporate role and we were getting on average 200 applications per role. I think keywords are really, really important, and we've certainly seen a lot more candidates reverse engineering their CV to tailor the job ad. If you're going to do that, and we're absolutely fine as recruiters for you to do that, but you need to be able to have the conversation should you get a call after that. So if you're saying that you're doing something on your CV, just be sure to be able to articulate that well over the phone when you have a phone screen or an interview, because sometimes it's very, very clear that AI is just being used to apply for a job and hope for an interview.
That's a really interesting point, actually, that you mentioned around the mismatch. But if people are just copy and pasting a job ad, giving it to, say, ChatGPT and spitting out a CV that responds to that, that feels like it's kind of going to be quite obvious. Is that what's happening, or are we not quite that overt?
Yeah, it's been really interesting for me to see AI play out, particularly in recruitment over the last couple of years. I have had somebody come through on paper that looked absolutely fantastic, the best candidate out of 200 CVs. When I tried to call them or contact them, they weren't actually a real person. So we're seeing a lot more of that coming through, a lot of fraudulent activity happening as a result of fake people applying for jobs. They didn't exist. There was no contact number. Oh, there was, but you couldn't contact them. The email address bounced back, but their CV was absolutely perfect. So I think allowing people to see the real you is really important. So I had another example where I interviewed somebody who looked great on paper. This was only a couple of months ago. And when we interviewed this person, they were using AI to respond. So they had an earpiece and we were asking questions and they were using AI to respond to the questions. And it was very, very obvious.
Wow.
And so I had to stop the candidate and say, I'm really sorry, but I can see that you're not really responding this way. And if that ever happens, we've just got to take the questioning in a different direction to really, I guess, catch them. So yeah, I think this is where the value of working with a consultant really helps, or a couple of good talent people, because they can really coach you through how to position yourself the best way possible way when applying for roles. But then also that interview coaching piece as well is really, really important. We want to see the real you. We don't want to see what's behind the CV. And that will come out. I can tell whether somebody's going to get a job within 7 seconds of meeting them.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
I think you beat AI any day, Anita. And I guess that comes from your experience, right?
Definitely. And when we are looking at hundreds of CVs at a time, make yours stand out. Have a bit of colour in it. Just have something that is going to capture our attention at the very beginning, whether it be your profile that's a little bit different, or I remember somebody used enhanced CV to create their CV many years ago. And as I was going through all these CVs, this one stood out and it was just so professional, and this candidate ended up getting the job. And, it's really making sure that you position yourself and your CV in a really professional manner. And, you're following through that whole way through the recruitment process.
Fantastic. So, when you say stand out, can you just give us a few little examples of what that might look like? Are you talking the formatting? Are you talking colors? Are you talking putting your photo on there? Like, what are some other examples?
Yeah, so I think a photo has its place for the right role. And most people have a LinkedIn profile and you've got a photo on LinkedIn, and we do go to LinkedIn to check. We verify experience versus what's on your CV. So not using the word spearheaded or dynamic, or, those words that are really, really common. Just have a profile that's going to grab our attention. I like a bit of color, so I hate just a Word document with just words on it, with no spacing, no clear paragraphs. Spelling mistakes are an absolute no-no. Our hiring managers are really, really pedantic about that.
And it's not too hard to do, right? It's
Not too
a
hard
little
to
bit
do.
of extra effort to really make it pop. I agree.
You've got to find what you're passionate about and what you're wanting to do after sport. And if it's property or real estate or anything like that, I would highlight that in a profile of a CV. So as your opening paragraph, you might say something like, I've been in high performing sports for 10 years. I have an absolute passion for property. And these are the areas that I think I can add value based on my sports background. So talk through it in your CV. But then again, coming back to networking, finding out who those key people are, reaching out to company directors, HR directors, talent leaders in that space. And attend any events as well. Those events are really, really powerful. There's often a lot of breakfasts and luncheons that I go along to, and it really helps me in my field. I'd really recommend that athletes do that too. So
Yeah, great tip there. Would you recommend, you just mentioned that it's a really competitive market right now, perhaps offering your services as a maybe an internship?
I think that is a great opportunity, and I've seen more and more candidates doing that at that sort of entry level. Nick, I've seen candidates writing to me directly saying, would you be open to an internship? I think companies need to be a little bit more open minded about taking candidates in and offering internships to candidates that have that potential. I think that's really important. Reaching out to those people and organisations and asking whether they have internships, because often they're not advertised.
Oh, interesting.
So just asking the question can certainly open a lot of doors as well.
Taking ownership and putting yourself forward takes a lot of guts, but it also demonstrates to the employer that you are a go-getter. You are someone who has a goal, and that in itself is quite attractive, right, in a candidate.
And I'll share with you my last experience in my last role. My very last hire a couple of weeks ago, she applied for a health and safety business partner, but she was at the coordinator level, and we had a lot of partners apply that were at the level that we needed. She was not at the level that we needed, but her determination and the way she spoke to her passion for health and safety, passion for the organisation and Tabcorp and what she wanted to do, she's now secured the job. And I think as recruiters, we need to be able, that comes back to the partnering with our stakeholders as well, rather than just looking at a job and a CV and trying to match that, saying, well, this person does have a lot of potential. They are coachable. They are adaptable. They'd be a great cultural fit for our organisation. And those things you can't coach, Nick. I was so proud of that placement because here's this candidate that was really putting herself out there. She knew she wasn't at the level, and she really, really worked hard to ensure that she got the job. And so I think a lot more hiring managers and organisations need to, as I mentioned earlier, look beyond just the CV and really look at what, in particular, what athletes can offer organisations.
That's super inspiring. I love hearing stories like that because it does give you hope. I think a lot of us have looked at jobs and gone, I'm not qualified. I'm never going to get it. And you talk yourself down, but flipping that and just showing that passion, if that can be the driver and give yourself every chance, then why not?
Absolutely. And Nick, I see a lot of women in particular doing that and not thinking that they are qualified. My tip with that is if you meet 70 or 80% of the criteria of a job, apply for it. You don't have to meet 100% of the criteria of a role. Throw your hat in the ring.
Interesting. Why is it, do you think?
It's a confidence thing. I think, you know, I see it with remuneration as well. Females are always underselling themselves when it comes to remuneration and often asking for $20,000 or $30,000 less than their male counterparts. I think there is a huge piece of work that needs to be done around coaching women on how to apply for the roles that could be right for them, and ensuring that they're asking for what they're worth. I guess it comes down to self-belief, and women need to have a lot more belief in themselves and putting themselves out there for roles that they'll be a good fit for.
I definitely agree with that.
It's really interesting, Nick. I was thinking about my time in my previous role and how many candidates that did apply for roles that were athletes, and they had fantastic CVs, and often I would ring them just to say to them, wow, you've done this, you've done that, great experience, but you're not quite right for this role. And I think how candidates respond also can absolutely help them push through to the next stage. So often candidates would say, thanks, Anita, for letting me know. I completely understand. But if they change that narrative and change that dialogue and have conversations with, actually, no, Anita, this is where I think you're wrong, and then telling me why and what value you can bring the organisation, then you're probably more likely going through to the next stage. So, I'd be more than happy to have conversations with candidates around how they can best do that when applying for roles, whilst making sure that their CV matches the roles that they're applying for as well.
That's such an interesting point. I've been in that position as well. And of course, I'm no athlete. But yeah, the advocating for yourself. Firstly, if the recruiter's called you, then that's a huge win. That's a golden opportunity to grab their attention. Don't let them get off the call before they've fully understood your value. Great tip. Thank you for sharing that. It's always
You're
really
welcome.
It's always really good to hear and how people can navigate these waters, because I think we often doubt ourselves, whether it's through fear or lack of certainty or am I good enough? So yeah, leading with your best foot forward and believing in yourself is always best.
And fear is just a false expectation appearing real, Nick.
Oh my gosh, that is gold. I love that. Yeah, pushing through fear and doing it anyway, I think needs to be our mantra. I mean, sports typically is male dominated, but we are starting to see a shift, which is fantastic. And I would love to see more female leadership, whether it's on boards, whether it's in coaching or, all throughout. I think there needs to be a little bit more equity there. Do you agree?
Do I agree? I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. And I think that has to start at the top. So that needs to be driven by, the CEOs of organizations. So you're never going to get the gender split right if it's not driven by the top. And, there's not somebody wanting, the same sort of gender balance within an organization. So, you can do as much work in talent, in P&C, but if it's not a belief at the top, then it's never going to happen.
Absolutely. And I would say for retention as well. So if that culture's not there, obviously that retention piece isn't going to, be as strong. So from a recruitment perspective, how do you help keep the right candidates in the right jobs?
I think programs. So I recently saw a program in my last role, and it was a Tab W program, and it ran for 8 weeks, and it was so well coordinated and executed, and it was really well received. So what the organisation did was looked at a number of high potential females that were coming through the organisation and put them on this fantastic leadership program. So I think making sure that there's always pathways for females going through an organisation, not just at that high end, but really from, early careers, identifying top talent, taking them through the organisation and providing them the support and the programs to succeed.
I love that. Actually, in last role was taken through one of those training opportunities and found it incredibly valuable. It's not always a straight line, and time off and children or, caring of commitments can be a big one. How would you recommend organisations deal to that?
I think that's where flexibility comes into play, Nick. I think I cannot put more of an emphasis on the importance of flexibility. And, organisations are bringing people back 3 days, 5 days, and that doesn't work for everybody. So I think offering that flexibility to employees is super important. And, flexibility is not just for working parents. Flexibility is for everyone. I had a girl in my team who was a CrossFit champion, and she used to say to me, Anita, I can't ask for flexibility because I'm not a mum. And I said, but you're an athlete. And so you've got to go to your physio appointments. You've got to do all those things. You've got to jump on flights. You do have the right to ask for flexibility. And so I think organisations that get it right, they offer flexibility to their employees. I went to a really fantastic luncheon a few years back at EY, and I met one of the partners there who represented Australia at triathlon. Now, she was a partner working full-time hours. She was representing Australia in triathlons, and she worked long hours, but she worked her day in sprints, and I loved that. So, the 9 to 5 paradigm was created in the 80s, believe it or not. And so many organisations are still working to that 9 to 5. But she was incredible. She would get up at 4 o'clock, she would train. She would then go to her physio. She wouldn't get into work until 10 o'clock in the morning. She was a very successful partner, but she was also a very successful triathlete. And I loved hearing that story. And that was only made possible because EY allowed that to happen.
It sounds like it's a good partnership when both sides are figuring it out together. And yeah, I would love to see more employers leaning that way rather than you have to conform to this, you have to be in the office at this hour, especially post COVID. But how are you seeing it now, a few years later? What's the dynamic around that flexibility piece? Because I feel like there's been a shift back to what it was.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And I've come from an organisation that brought back 5 days in the office. From a talent perspective, that was very difficult. I think candidates expect a hybrid working model now. And, we have lost top talent to working 5 days in the office. So my personal opinion is, I think hybrid organisations are going to be a lot more successful at attracting top talent than bringing people back 5 days. Just, people need flexibility at all stages of their life. Yeah, it's a very interesting topic.
It certainly is. And look, I see the pros and cons for both sides, whether it's in the office and staying at home. But at the end of the day, back to your original reasoning for starting up, you've got talent. It should be a one-on-one relationship. If you want that talent, how do you make it work with that employer versus a blanket ruling? And again, that's tricky too, because other people in the team might get their noses out of joint. But when I had my team, I was very much, yes, there's a minimum standard that was expected around high performance. But equally, if people had things going on in their life that needed attention, they knew that they could come to me and we'd sort it out together. And I felt like as a leader, I loved that, right? Because I knew that I was going to get the best out of my people. I knew that my people were going to stay with me and my team. I knew that we were going to do great work together and the team would work cohesively.
And it absolutely creates trust. And we all know that when you build trust with your manager, you get a lot more out of people by having that mutual trust.
What are the opportunities that you're hoping to create for candidates?
So what excites me the most about You've Got Talent and working with candidates is really being able to identify some really good potential and top talent. For me, I'm a conversationalist at heart, and building relationships is what I do. And I'm really excited about being able there and really make sure that I'm matching them to the right organisations and not just putting bums on seats somewhere. It's really making sure that the match is right for candidates, but also for organisations, and really offering an incredible candidate experience. So, yeah, that's what I'm most excited about.
I'm super excited for you as well. So I guess the biggest takeaway is athletes aren't starting from scratch. They have a high performance foundation. It seems there is a huge opportunity for businesses as well to really reframe their hiring process. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one thing that employers should really understand and take from this about athletes is they bring a performance mindset that is incredibly hard to teach. And, we don't see that in candidates that are coming through the process. So really, have a look at that. And, a strong performance mindset is going to be incredibly valued for organisations. I think for athletes, just be mindful not to undersell yourself and assume that employers will automatically see your value in your sporting background on paper. So you really have to make sure that you're drawing that out a lot more, and start before you feel fully ready as well. It's the small steps I think that really count, and don't wait for the perfect time to start building and planning out a career outside of sport.
Great tips there. Thank you. Now, we always finish our episodes with this final question, Anita. So, can you tell me, what does becoming MatchFit mean to you?
Great question. I think to me, becoming match fit is about being ready for what's next. So, not just physically, but mentally and professionally as well. So, it's about constantly backing yourself, always building capability, and stepping into opportunity and being confident when you're doing that as well. So, it comes back to just backing yourself always. So, that's what match fit means to me. And I absolutely love what you girls have created.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute treat having you on today. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your very practical tips for everybody. I wish you the absolute best for You've Got Talent. I know you're already off and running, and it's going to be exciting to see you thrive. So I will put the link to your new website in the show notes, and people can email you there if they're interested. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Amazing. Thanks, Nick, and thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for listening to Becoming MatchFit. If today's conversation inspired you, feel free to share it with a teammate or someone you love as well. You can access free tools, resources, and our community in MatchFit 360 Academy. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, unlock your value, change your game, and become MatchFit.